Welcome to my podcast. My name is Aldo Matza, percussionist, drummer, and artistic director of Kosa Music, inviting you to join in conversations with friends, artists, professionals, and experts in our music world. Today I have a wonderful marimba player who's been on my radar for a long time. We've been friends for years, and we're going to talk about shaping your journey. But I'd like to remind you, if you can help us out, subscribe, and then you'll get the latest news and the latest who's on next and what's on next, and also some surprises that we'll have going forward. Mark, thank you so much for joining me on this. It's really wonderful to have somebody like you, and you're right now in Australia, right?
I'm down under. Yeah, it's been here a couple of weeks now. Yeah, good morning or good afternoon or good evening. Nice to see you. You look great, man.
Thank you. I'm in Montreal, so this is night. So we had to figure this one out because of the time difference. I've been to Melbourne in the past, and I did a residency at the University of National University, and I mean Australia is a beautiful place. So I'm really happy you're there, and winter's coming on this side, and I know summer's coming on your end.
That's right. Spring is starting to show itself here. It's really beautiful. It's a really beautiful place. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. It's beautiful. But before we move forward on this, I wanted to ask you if you could just tell us a little bit of your background, just to set us up as far as like your kind of beginnings, where you want to start from, and then we can kind of take your journey from there.
Aldo, my journey is like yours and everyone else's. It's very unique and although there's going to be some similarities. Of course, we all went to music school, had wonderful teachers, or not, you know how that goes. But I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and I was so fortunate that my mom hooked me up with lessons with the timpanist with the Richmond Symphony when I was like in sixth grade, and it just really changed my life, in terms of like what to expect and how to play and just about the joy of music. I mean, just moving and being part of something. My sister was a dancer and still is. She's older than I am. She danced on Broadway for 20 years or so. And so I was always around dance and live music, and I was always hanging out with the drummers. And just to learn what they knew and just to watch. And it was just exciting. Of course, I went to undergraduate school in music. I went to East Carolina University, which was about 3 hours south of Richmond. And then I went to North Texas for my graduate degree. And from then on, I've been working and gigging and writing and playing and really having a blast. It's been an amazing journey.
Nice. And now you are at University of North Texas. You're the chair of the department?
Yeah, I'm the coordinator of the percussion department.
Okay. Yeah. How many people are in the department? How many teachers?
We have 17 teaching percussion there. And we have usually about 130 to 140 percussion students. And it's a little village of drummers. And it's been the joy of my life, really, to work there. Not every day is a blessing, but you know how this goes. We have such an energy and such an amazing group of talented professionals who are sharing their art and love for music with these students. And I think it's a really unique place because of, not just because we have great teachers, lots of places have great teachers, but we have a great community where the jazz students and the orchestral students and the marimbas and the steel drummers and the marching guys and everybody together is under one umbrella. And we share with each other. We do our best to create really positive situations where students can come up and perform and really have a chance to fail. Because by failing, we grow. By failing, we learn what we need to be able to do. And we don't want to be perfect. We really don't strive to be perfect. What we try to strive to be is knowledgeable and to be engaged and be prepared. And that leads to, hopefully, to expression. And that's where we want to be.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the road that took you there, I mean, what was one of the key things that one day you woke up and you said, that's what I'm going to do, and what happened? Like somebody opened the door, somebody turned a light on, names. Like, what was the moment or moments?
And what was the moment? Um, I think like you, although I think and maybe people listening to this, there's not maybe one single moment, but there's always a time when you realized inside your heart, inside your soul, that this is what I want to do. I want to be part of this. I want to learn more about this, and I want to do my very best, and I want to have fun. I mean, with me, making music is enjoyment, and I wanted to be involved, and I felt that really at a pretty young age. I mean. Um, I remember I had an older brother and sister. My older brother had a whole series of like army helmets that he would play with, and I would take out the green Tinker toys for any of you that remember what those are, and bang around on the tops of those helmets just because I would and play along with recordings, just having fun. And but I really think that I understood at least where my path might be in terms of an adult career was in college. You know, I think I had a wonderful teacher named Harold Jones, and who's a professor emeritus from East Carolina. And wow, he helped me so much. And he didn't tell me what to do or how to do it necessarily, but he showed me the potential of the musicality of what can happen when you do make great sounds and that you're smart, you know, about how you're producing those sounds. And so he really lit the fire. I don't know if the fire was burning, but he kind of more pointed it in the right direction for me. And I was around a lot of great people at that time. Rich Holly was a student there, Jack Stamp. And I'm probably I'll start naming names and miss, you know, a bunch of people. But, you know, just such a great family and of course, then I went to North Texas and the family just got really big really fast. So, you know, it's been, that's kind of how it was for me. I didn't have like a lightning bolt. It was always something that I felt was part of who I was.
Right, and you're really well known as a marimbist. At least I have always known you as a marimba soloist and a composer. Of course, you've written a lot of works for solo marimba and also ensembles. But was that your first instrument that you played, or did you start on drum set like I did, or many did? Even Vic Firth was a drummer, and Louis
Yeah, no
Charbonneau was
kidding.
a drummer. Then went,
I got I played piano for a while. You know, my mom said, you know, you've got to play piano, you know, and so I didn't want to play the piano though. I wish I had played it longer, to be honest with you, but I did. I had several years of taking some lessons on piano as a young boy, but I received a drum set. I started playing drum set, and I was into rock and roll. I was into jazz. I was into playing along with Broadway musicals. I mean, I was whatever recordings I could find in the house, I would play with, and I just loved playing the drum set, and I still do. Um, and you know that took me into studying. You know, as I mentioned, with this gentleman from Charles Drysdale from the Richmond Symphony, and then you know started to realize that there was more to it than just drum set. And but I always came back to the drum set. I think I always brought the things I learned back to that energy and that vitality that you oh, it's just so much fun to be behind a band and playing drums or hand drums. Hand drum. I played a lot of hand drums as well. And the so you know, I feel like yeah, I've been able to play a lot of marimba. I love the marimba. Goodness gracious. I mean, but the I love doing other things too as well.
yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I've always been, I mean, my beginnings were the drum set, of course. Then when I discovered percussion, then I went totally ballistic. I had gone to one of those Ludwig percussion symposiums, which totally turned all my lights on. And then I wanted to know it all. You know, Gary Burton showed me how to hold four mallets. I didn't really play mallets yet. Imagine your first lessons are with Gary Burton, and he's showing me how to play four mallets. And then I went to university, and everybody was playing two mallets, and I showed them, no, this is how you play. Everybody's got four mallets. I couldn't play really, but I could hold them. So I went the other way around. Then I started learning to play, and then I met the guys in repercussion, of course, and then that opened those other possibilities of the world music, the everything. And we were crazy from contemporary music. And I mentioned drummer because it seems to be a common thread here. that people who are playing drums, even though they may end up being some of the greatest timpanists on the planet, the greatest marimbists on the planet, but still, there's the drum set in there, and it's a common theme that seems to go through, and you're always coming back. And now I developed this whole hybrid playing with everything from Cuban to African to hand percussion to electronics. And then somebody asked me, like, why do you do that? I said, well, there are two reasons. I mean, I was fortunate with repercussion. I had to keep all the instruments up, as you probably had to, right?
Yeah.
And then I said, and I could never make up my mind, so I just did it all. And then I said, how could I do it all and at the same time? So I did. But I mean, you wrote a method on marimba technique, so I'm sure you spent a lot of time figuring out your approach to this. How long did it take you to write that book?
Well, Aldo, let me back up just for a moment about your work with repercussion. I mean, I was a big fan. I mean, that just blew me away with what you guys were doing, and I just loved it from the day one. First time I got a chance to hear you guys play, and of course the recordings. So bravo. I know that's been, but thank you for that inspiration, my friend.
Oh wow, man! Wow, now you really hit me on that one. But I'll say that the band actually, I mean, we're still performing, and more or less, we're not doing 150 concerts a year like we used to, but every once in a while we get together in special concerts. And the last one, just before the whole, the lockdown, we did a concert with the Havana Symphony as guests, and that was something else. And so, we keep it going just because we call each other and say, okay, I have a project. Are you in? Of course, everybody says yes.
Everybody's yes. No kidding.
But thank you for the compliment.
Oh, man.
I mean, everybody inspires everybody, Mark. It's incredible.
Oh, well, it's a small world too, because as you meet somebody in one spot and you go, wow, this person's really got something going on. But then 6 months later, 6 years, sometimes you meet that person again, and things. It's just such a small world in what we do, I think, and it's really, really great to share. You asked me about the book. I have two books. The first book I wrote about almost 20 years ago. Oh man, the marimba technique through music. And here's the problem. Although I came to North Texas, and here's 130, 140 students, and I can't teach them all, thank God. And I wanted to find a way though how I would know what kinds of skills they would have as they went through the different levels that we had. And we had a pretty good system before, but it really wasn't giving me really definitive guideposts. So I said, well, I need to write a book for the studio. And so it took me over a year. I thought about it for a couple of years. As it kind of germinates and you start to think about how would I describe this and how would I move this forward and such. And I decided that I would write etudes on just one stroke. You mentioned the grip that Gary taught you, Gary Burton. And for four mallets, whether it's the Burton stroke or the Musser-Stevens approach or the traditional approach, there's only really four ways to move the mallets, So I took those four strokes and I started to create etudes that would only use primarily one stroke at a time. So for example, like a double vertical stroke, here's 48 bar etude that 99% uses just that stroke, but it also has some music to share. So why did I do this? Is because I wanted the students to be able to focus on their sound, one approach at a time, with a teacher, somebody that could guide their musicianship and make them understand what their what the contrasts are and things. So that's how this started, and I started to I wrote these etudes and named them for streets where I've lived. And I gave it to the students, and they seem to really like it. And it's been a wonderful teaching tool, and I've been really blessed and humbled that a lot of people, or teachers around the country and the world, have also using that book as a tool.
Beautiful, and you've done percussion ensemble repertoire as well, right?
Yeah. I've written a fair number of pieces for percussion ensemble. Here's a good one for is that my first piece I wrote was I was teaching at Middle Tennessee State University in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, right south of Nashville, and it was a new program, and I wanted to write. We didn't have a lot of money, although if you might imagine that, a music program that doesn't have a lot of money. So every time we'd have a drumhead break, I would have to go ask, for money to buy some drum heads. And so what happened is that as I would get a little bit of money to replace drum heads, I would save the old ones, put them in the closet, thinking someday there's going to be an emergency. Someday, right before a concert, some head is going to blow and I'm going to go, I don't have a brand new head, but I have one that will work, so I can put it on. Well, that catastrophe never happened, and thank goodness, I guess. But I ended up with a closet full of drum heads. So I decided to write a piece called Head Talk, and which was 5 people just playing drum heads. And I kind of wrote it for my students to work on some rhythmic interlocking things. And it had some humor to it. It had some fun to it. So anyway, I wrote this piece and people seemed to like it. And then I wrote a trio on the marimba called Stubernick, which I had kind of had in the back of my head. And I wrote that down and I started sending these pieces, Aldo, to publishers. And I had many letters saying, no, we're not going to publish this piece. No one will ever play this. No one will ever play this because it's too weird. It's too, you got, who wants to beat on the marimba on the side of the marimba or whatever. And, I believed in those works. I went, no, these are good pieces. I think they just don't understand. So I just started selling them out of my house, and so people would write and say, hey, Mark, can I get a copy of Head Talk? So I'd run to print shop and, print them off and send it. Well, eventually, Eric Johnson and I had been involved starting Innovative Percussion. And I called Eric and I said, I really think we should start publishing music. And then I don't have to keep running to the printers and we can do it, through the company and promote the company. And that has come full circle, although because for a while, for 30 years, they were publishing music and not just my music, but now many, many, many works, which as of last year, I've just I bought that portion of the company back because Innovative wanted to get out of the publishing business because their real business is sticks and mallets, of course, and they make wonderful products. But so with my wife and I had already started a small publication company, which is now much bigger. It's called Musicon Publication. So what comes around goes around. But I guess the point of the story is that if you believe, then you can find a way to make it happen, and I just didn't say no. I didn't give up. I could have put those letters from those publishers and, in my file cabinet and said, oh, well, I guess that wasn't a good move. But it turned out to be a really good move because both of those pieces got played thousands of times. I mean, just incredible amount of performances. So anyway, it's those things. And I enjoy writing different music too, but I write I love percussion ensemble and writing for the marimba, of course, too.
Nice. And I mean, talking about percussion ensemble, we decided with the group, I mean, we have Koza Publishing that actually has been publishing, or has started publishing my book, The Cuban Rhythms for Percussion and Drum Set, which we had
Very good.
Alfred. Thank you. And we had Alfred was distributing it, and then in Cuba, the Ministry of Culture has accepted that book to be used as an official text in the Cuban music schools. Imagine. So, I mean, that was I mean, for me, that was like that was a big one. It was, and I said I made sure that it took me 3 years to do this. I worked with Changuito. I worked with all the guys in Cuba, and I exhausted everybody, and I mean exhausted everybody because I just didn't want to come off like I invented anything except the methodology, the way that we would understand, which was always problematic because when we do our workshops and all these trips that we've done over 20 years now in Cuba, they're always the same questions. And after a while, the Cuban masters, all these people who have been playing this stuff for gazillions of years and have invented some of the rhythms, after a while, I realized they weren't. It was not that they didn't know how to answer the question; they didn't really understand the question. Not their fault. It's just we're asking a weird question that doesn't really make sense, but we're speaking from where we come from. And so I found that interesting when it dawned on me. So then I took it upon myself to to understand like both sides. If I was here, I would ask this question: why is this question being asked? And then I put myself on the other side and say, so that's what he thinks or she thinks that question was. And they would look at me, and I would be facilitating all the time. And then suddenly, after years, putting it together and saying, now I understand I have to write a book just to explain how you do this and what that means for us, because we're learning this. And so I did it with 75 play along tracks with, everything written out. So I really went crazy on this one, but I made sure it was about them. And I just put it together in the methodology, the way if you want to learn this music, anybody playing the music, you have to start with the tradition. And then how does that on the percussion? And then how does the percussion for the drum set player translate? Some ideas on that. And that's really the only way you can understand it. And everybody has to learn those rhythms. And then we won't talk about clave because that would take another week or 2 weeks to, but it's a whole concept, and I won't go into that. But I mean, the music though, we decided with the group that we're going to publish all the music that we've done over the last, the whole repertoire from the beginning. So we're going to slowly publish that. This is a big one, so I'll let you know when that comes out, because there's a lot of great music that shouldn't stay in the drawers. Some we composed, some composed for us, solo with orchestra, and all kinds of, we break all the rules and all the, as you know, I mean, you remember what we do and what we did, and we were like four crazy guys, and we didn't like the rules. We just wrote because we loved what we did, right? Just like you did.
Exactly, man. And it's cultural. I know at school, we at North Texas, we have several, many world music programs. We have a South Indian group, African ensembles, gamelan, Afro-Cuban, Brazilian, and the students want to learn the rhythms. They want to learn the rhythms and how do I move my hands on this drum? But that's really just like this much of it, because if you don't understand the culture and if you don't understand, how that music functions in their society, then it really it changes so much when you have the full picture. And so everything you're talking about is hitting home big time, and that's why your book is successful, and that's why I feel like our program helps to those students to move forward in those areas, to at least get their toe holes on of exactly why this music is important. Like why with students, for example, they'll ask me like, why should I play in an African ensemble? What would that do for me? Am I going to get any gigs on an African music? I mean, what's going to happen? And I'm like, you have no idea what's going to happen until you open the door and you go, oh. And what happens is that everything that we, as ourselves, us as students, me as a student, you as a student, when we play music that we're not comfortable with, we have to learn more, we have to invest more, and that becomes part of our vocabulary, doing other things too. So it all comes around. It's perfect.
No, you're absolutely right. And the other day I had a conversation with Alex Acuna, who was on my podcast, and we spoke about exactly that. He was doing a film, and some of the guys from the LA Philharmonic were part of the people. I think there's 6, 7 percussionists or something. And at one moment in the whole film, the conductor and the arranger said to Alex, he said, Alex, we need like a 30-second African thing. Can you put something together? Can you give us something and we'll work it out? So Alex said, of course. So he turned around to the other guys. Some were familiar, like Emil Richards. And, these guys were, of course, familiar with it. But some of the guys, not so much. So he just turned around and said, he pulled out some djembes and dundums. He said, okay, you play this and you play that and you play that. Put it together in a matter of minutes. And it was done. And it was a big hit. I forget what film that is. But everybody... Afterwards, he says, some of the guys in the LA Philharmonic then call him and say, I want to learn more of this, because then you realize, of course, everybody knows it's not the 1930s anymore. It's not, it's a different world. And it's, like you said earlier, it's a small world in more ways than one. And percussion is like the universal language. Like everybody speaks percussion, right? And then it's just a question of the cultural context. And it's really interesting as we move forward as students that we learning something new, except something perhaps like tabla. I mean, that's deep. You have to spend a lot of time, just like violin. But most other instruments, it's this transferable knowledge. If you're interested, you have to understand the cultural context. But learning what that is just makes you a much more interesting player. And we can go all over the planet. I mean, you're in Australia playing this concert, right? Or this recording. And we can go anywhere. And we are, someone said this to me, and I forget, I don't think I invented this, but we are a country. We are the music country. And we're part of those, we're citizens of that country because we speak
Yes.
that language also.
I haven't heard that saying. I don't like it. I like that. Yeah, no
But
kidding.
when you
Yeah, I
think
feel
about
like
it,
because
yeah,
you know that sometimes you're going to walk into a situation either with playing in an orchestra or a show orchestra, whatever, and someone's going to turn to you and go, "Oh, we really need," in this case, for example, with Alex, "Oh, we need some African groove for 30 seconds. Can you do this?" Or Latin or whatever it may be, And if you've had those experiences, you're going to be able to share and build a bit stronger career, of course.
sure. And let alone the personal satisfaction, and also just being part of whatever is going on musically in a more respectful and legitimate way, because you don't have to be a master of everything, but if you are a
No.
if you are a musician, at least your musicianship will help you get that across, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was just thinking you did some work with Keiko Abbey in the past.
Sure have. Yeah, I've been so fortunate to Keiko and I we recorded two DVDs together and one CD. And most of that was through our connections with Eugene Corporon and the University of North Texas Wind Symphony. We did two CDs with them, and then we played at PASIC, and we made a couple of DVDs, as I mentioned. The it was a joy. It was an absolute joy. And Keiko's an icon in the marimba world, obviously, and for really great reason. She had a vision. First off, she's a true musician. She loved music. She loves music. And she had a vision of what she wanted that instrument to grow to become, which, violinist doesn't think that way. You don't think like, what can I do to make this violin better? It's just because it is probably better, at this stage. But the marimba, when Keiko was coming along, was really had some growth ahead of it. And she saw it. She saw the potential, at least. And it was really so much fun. She's a dear friend. I love her, and she's just just an amazing person. And we last played in Poland. We did a concert together in Poland and played with an orchestra there. And she's just always smiling, and she wants to always be playing. I love it. She wants to be in motion. Do we have time for a short story
Sure,
about this?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the first time I played with her, although she was going to fly into Dallas, and I was someplace, Chicago or someplace, doing something else. And so she arrived in Dallas, and I wasn't in town that day, but I had, somebody pick her up, and I flew in like later that night, called her in the morning and said, "Hey, let me take you to lunch. I know you're getting over the jet lag. Maybe, I can just, we can get some lunch. I'll drive you around a little bit. We can talk, and then we can, maybe the next day you'll be feeling, more, get over the jet lag, and we can be playing some music." Well, I took her, we had lunch, we had a beautiful lunch, and drove her around campus. She goes, "Well, can we go inside the school?" I'm like, "Of course." So we pull the car and go inside, and she goes, "I think we should play together now." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I had been on another gig. Of course I knew the music I was going to play with her, but I hadn't played it in 3 or 4 days. And I was like, "I think I'm going to need a few minutes." And she goes, "Give me 20 minutes too." So she sets up in our practice room. I go down to my office, and nothing feels right. I mean, nothing feels right. I just, you're playing, and obviously I'm a little uptight about it now. And so 20 minutes goes by, and I get my bag, walk down to the room, and we V up the marimbas. And as before we do that, she goes, "Now, before we start playing, I have to tell you something." And I said, "Sure, Keiko, what is it?" She goes, "Well, I'm very nervous." And I went, me too. And we started laughing, and at that point, then it was all fine. It was just one of those moments. It was just it's a really sweet moment. But yeah, she taught me a lot. I wasn't a student of hers, but just being around her, you just get a huge sense of her respect for the instrument and her ideals, and we share a lot of interest together, obviously. So, and like I said, we're good friends. So, but yeah, that was a really wonderful
Yeah,
moment.
no,
Yeah.
she's always been an inspiration ever since she did the marimba spiritual piece, right? And we actually played with Keiko in
Oh
Japan, in
yeah.
Tokyo, the piece. We were on tour, and at one point I said we were going to be in Tokyo, and I said to our agents, it would be great. And I said to the guys also, wouldn't it be great to have Keiko play that with us? So we communicated beforehand. So then we prepared the piece, and so we played it with her just as a special guest for that one piece in our concert. And it was really funny, Mark. I mean, I'll never forget this one because I forget who else I mentioned this to, but in the part, my part was the one that starts after the marimba introduction. So I'm looking at her and thinking, okay, she probably won't play it at the speed that most people play it. So I said I'll give her a chance. She's maybe a little older now, and I respectfully, we're at the rehearsal. We're just gonna. So I went, instead of the usual, I went dun 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 dun, and then she just turns around and looks at me and goes, and I looked at the guys. I said, okay. So I take it up, and I keep going, and she's waiting for me. So I pick it up, and I'm saying to myself, oh, is she gonna make this? So I just went, as far as, and then she said, okay. Then she turns around and starts, and she played the whole piece. And we were tired. She was not. I mean,
That sounds like her. Yes.
amazing energy and amazing. And it was really funny because when we did the concert, we didn't have a lot of time for this. We had to go through it once, the sound check, as we were in and out of, these Asian tours were brutal. We didn't have a lot of time to do much, and a lot of not much talking either. But after the performance, she said, it was fantastic. But you don't have to read everything that's there, because we did. You think this is her composition, we respect it, and that's it. She says, no, you could improvise most of it if you like. And then we all looked at each other and just said, you don't want to take that liberty unless somebody says, open it up or something. Of course we could improvise, but
Sure.
you don't want to do that. But she loves to improvise, as you probably know. And
No kidding.
it was, it said, wow, I learned a lot from her and that energy, and she's still doing it. I mean, amazing, right?
Yeah, we were doing her Prism Rhapsody too for wind ensemble and two marimbas, and she had written out a large. Well, it actually has a couple little cadenzas in this piece, but one's a really pretty big one, and she written it out, and I had learned it, of course, and we got to doing it, and we did it, and we looked at each other, and she goes, "Let's not play these notes," and I'm like, "Sure." She goes, "Let's just make it up," and every concert we just improvised. And the one for the recording was just, we were so excited that it went so well, and I think that's the beauty, that the things that maybe I use in my teaching from her is the ability that students can start making music as soon as the practice room door closes. You don't have to go through a series of exercises and such till I get to the music. Now the music's already inside you. You can start playing that, and you can have a goal with some technical exercise if you want inside your head, but you can be playing music at the same time. And that's something that she embraced, and she embraced the, as you mentioned, the improvisation, the idea of creating spontaneously, not with a jazz format, although she can do a little bit of that, to be honest, but it's really more of a free improvisation with her.
Right. Yeah. No, and I tell some of my students, even because I do a lot of rock and pop and everything else. I blur the lines. So when I speak to classical people who have to play those notes, I say, originally classical musicians improvised, and Bach was one of the great improvisers. right? So I said, so
Yeah,
why lock it in? Why make it such a boring box that you have to play the same notes all the time? I mean, of course, in a symphony, that's a different ballgame. But having this concept of it can be improvised, and everybody should learn to improvise in the context of the piece or the music or what the concept is of the piece.
right. Listen, I've seen students that fall apart because they were not 100% accurate. And I'm like, really? If that's the high B bar that you've got to jump over all the time, you're going to have some issues because nobody's perfect, number one. And number two, is you can't be perfect consistently. You might have a great run, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it, 6 times in a row or whatever. That's what I was mentioning earlier is that this whole concept about being perfect and like note accuracy, because we can hear it on our computers. I mean, you and I mean, yeah, I can hear a lot of pieces I write on the computer, but I don't want to listen to it on the computer. It doesn't sound good to me. It just gives me a representation of what it could be, and that the music that we play, that for notes that are written on the page, like with Keiko that you mentioned, is just a representation of the idea, and then therefore you're going to take it to the next level. I've heard some really amazing virtuosic marimbas, if you will, who didn't play all the right notes on the page. They just didn't play the right notes, but it still sounded glorious. And it's because they were still feeling everything musically about it. It's like right now in this conversation, if we stumble on some words or, stutter a moment or two, doesn't mean that the conversation's over. It just means that you might use that to take yourself to the next point in the conversation or whatever. And that's what musicians do as well. And we got to stop thinking that oh, I don't improvise, that's not me. Actually, you're right. Everybody has to improvise, or you just can't really be a true musician, I think.
Yeah, it's like having a conversation, and you're totally rehearsed, and there's nothing coming from you in that conversation that you may have spent. How many years have you spent in your career? I mean, surely you have something to say, right? And
Wait,
you should
excuse me.
have.
Let me look at the script here. Let me check. No, I'm joking.
And I think that's why I always refer to the musicality, because that should be king. It's the musicality of the thing, and if it makes sense within the framework of what you're trying to say, or what the subject matter is, for lack of a better word, I think. Yeah, you also did some work with the Jew percussion group in Taiwan.
Yeah, I've known Mr. Jew for, oh wow, since the early '90s or so, and I've been over there a couple times, to work, to his summer camps and his festival that he does. Wow, that's an amazing work. I've just been inspired by Mr. Jew because of his vision again and his organization of how he's going to put this educational platform out for thousands and thousands of students. We don't realize because we think Taiwan, oh, it's a small little country. Yes, it is a small country, but he has about 10,000 students taking lessons in his series of schools and books. And it's just really impressive. It's amazing. And of course, the Jew ensemble is coming to Pasig this year. It's going to perform an evening concert this year. Um, and many of the players in that the group are dear friends, and I've written some music for them as well. And I wrote a work for Mr. Jew when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and we played it at the convention that year in 2016. And I don't know. I just think he's just one of those guys that has saw an opportunity and was able to really take control of that and help a lot of people. Really.
Sure. No, it was brilliant. And I think also from a political point of view, I think the government really supported him. And that was really forward thinking in his whole vision of, every city having a school attached to this whole curriculum. I remember the first time we went to Taiwan, it was a funny story that our instruments got not barred, but stopped because the first time we went to China, I think it was 1986. I'm really dating this. And it was in our whole tour, we performed in Beijing, and we were the first group to ever perform in Beijing, and the first group to ever really get paid. It really wasn't very much, but it was more of a, we were on the tour, and people wanted to see it, to go there, and it was an incredible experience. There were like 7 cars and 20 million bicycles. I still remember this the first time. And when we went to Taiwan, we had to go through Hong Kong, I think. And some of our instruments got left behind because of customs, because of that. At that time, you couldn't go directly. Okay, and it was really interesting. And so Mr. Ju came through, and our agents on the ground, the people called people, and instruments arrived and marimbas. So he really helped us out. Otherwise, there would have been no concert in Taiwan the first time. And he's done some incredible work, and I've heard his group a number of times. They even came to Montreal once, a couple of years ago, and at PASIC I've heard them also, and I think once in Taiwan. And I visited their schools. What they've been doing over there, it's a real model, and I'm really happy that there is this political interest at understanding to make better people. I mean, you and I know that. I mean, we're citizens of the world. I mean, and we, as what music does, is work on solutions all the time. There are no problems. You always have to work on the solution. You have to play in time, play in tune, play the right notes, the composition between people, and we're always looking for solutions. The great resolve, right? And
it's the puzzle every time. No kidding. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really
and
great.
it's an amazing process, and then it's like anything else. Whenever something comes up, you're always looking at, okay, how can I resolve that? Because that's how we're trained. How can I fix that quickly? Yeah, and it's an amazing thing. I also saw. I mean, I hear. I know some of your students and some of the people who talk really highly of you. I was also impressed. You did one thing that I listened to during the whole pandemic thing. You did a thing with Gary Burton where you had him answering people's questions, and that was very nice that you organized that.
Well, although it's here we are in this lockdown, if you will, but North Texas was always teaching percussion like face to face. We weren't teaching from home except for that spring of 20 when everybody went home, but here we couldn't bring no audiences, everybody knows this story, no audiences. And for any concert, we could stream, of course, no guests, nobody could come on campus. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I said, how are we going to inspire our students? And I started thinking about who would I want to speak to about music? Who are people that inspire me? And so I got on the phone, I called Gary, and I said, Gary, would you be interested in, doing a talk? And we called it 10 Questions Plus. And he said, sure. And so then I called Louis Conte, and Louis said, yeah, I'll do it. And I called Keiko Abe, and she said, I'll do it. And oh my goodness, it just kind of went on and on. Steve Gadd was on that list, and goodness. Anyway, it just went on and on. Andy Norell did one with us, Peter Erskine. I mean, so the very first one though was Gary Burton. And so we had been setting it up and trying to promote it as best we could. And I thought, what would be really cool is if somebody could come in to these talks who would be a special person in that person's life, but he wouldn't know or she wouldn't know that this guest was coming. So I called Chick Corea and I said, Chick, would you be interested in, I told him what we were doing, at first through his agent. I'd only met him once before. And so his agent wrote me back and said, I just talked to him. He's interested, but he doesn't know. And I'm like, okay. So here comes the day of the interview. Still, I don't know if Chick's going to show up or not. And about 45 minutes before he writes me, he says, Mark, I'll be there. Don't worry. And so we're talking nice. Along. And all of it. And Gary is at that moment talking about meeting Chick. This is how I met Chick Corea, like 40 some years ago. Those guys had 7 Grammys together and played all around the world, just amazing musicians. And so he's telling the story, and Chick has come into the talk. So now he's one of the audience, and then there's, at one point, Gary takes a breath and Chick says something like, excuse me, Gary, I don't think I remember it that way, and they started laughing. And Gary's like, well, you tell the story then. They started laughing, and they told about Armando's rumba, how they first played together. And maybe that wasn't the tune, but nevertheless, how the producer said, we need somebody else to go back on stage. Who wants to play a duet? And Gary and Chick went, okay, I'll do it. And that's how it started. And none of us knew that Chick was seriously ill at that time. I mean, he looked thin, but he didn't. Even Gary didn't know that he was suffering from cancer. And so this was in late September, and I believe in January is when Chick passed. And that was one of the last times that Gary and Chick had a chance to talk and laugh together. Since that time, Gary has done a similar talk for the American Percussion Seminar that I host in North Texas, and he's just an amazing amount of information. He's just incredible. He's such an amazing musician, but also an incredible teacher from his work with Berkeley, and he's just everything. Really, just really incredible.
Oh no! He was one of my big inspirations, and I've always admired his clarity of everything. Made everything so simple. I mean, you look at the thing, and he would, after he's finished, after 3 sentences, the thing clears up, totally cleared up. He's amazing.
He came to North Texas one time. He was going to play a jazz festival in Dallas, and Makoto Ozone was with him, pianist. So he calls me that morning and says, "Hey, Mark," he goes, "Is it okay if I bring Okoto with me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that'll be just fine." So he goes, "But we need to practice." I said, "Well, listen, I'm going to hook you up in the concert hall where you can practice, but it needs to be an open rehearsal." He goes, "Okay." So he went up there and we watched them rehearse for like 2 hours, and then he did a clinic for like another 2 hours. It was really outstanding, and he was so generous. He didn't want to be paid. He didn't want to take any money. He just wanted to come and be part of it. And he was just very giving, very generous person. I can't tell you more. Just amazing.
Oh no, for sure. And I mean, I tried to get him to COSA a number of times, but he was touring so much and so busy. I mean, it was impossible. But that would have been really, really nice to have him at COSA, because I mean, there we were doing. I mean, our whole concept was this cross learning, drummers sitting in a class with Gary Burton, or whoever was going to be there. We had Mike Minieri, we had tons of people over the years, tons and tons.
Sure.
And I really, as I said earlier, I don't recognize the lines, the blurring. So somebody who's a timpanist should know how to play samba, or should know how to be introduced to Cuban, the same way that somebody who's really into Cuban stuff should know how to play crash cymbals, or at least know what that is, and just have a general cross reference, and then they can decide later if they want to go deeper into stuff. But you need some kind of introduction, but introduction from the top, not this is just an introduction from somebody who read the book. And so I really missed not having the opportunity to invite him, but I will find a way to get Gary out if he's up to it. I mean, he stopped playing.
That might not happen at this point, but he's I don't know how many of those things he does. Probably not very many, but because he's told me it's only usually like 1 or 2 a year. And but he's very giving. He seemed to be very open, and of course he's having some past history. It probably helped, of course, in getting that started. But I think once he saw, I think maybe there was over 200 people on that Zoom call in the beginning, that first one. And man, I'm telling you, when Chick came in the room, the whole place just was electric, because it's just these two guys. And when we did, like, for example, Louis Conte, I asked Chester Thompson to come in. And Chester came in. Of course, they were talking about all their work with Phil Collins and their tours and such. And man, it's just that dynamic. And really, it didn't matter what question we asked, because we just stepped back and watched these people like Chick and Gary and Chester and Louis talk, just to talk and enjoy each other's for a moment and reconnect. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no,
really
no,
cool.
absolutely, and it's important for people to see that, for us and everybody to document these things so that we can hear back and be inspired and let people say certain things that they've always or never had the opportunity to actually say a certain thing because the timing was not right or just they were just not there. I remember when we mentioned Chick, I remember the first time I heard Gary Burton on record. It was this Crystal Silence album, and the duo. I mean, I think I wore out 3 copies of that one, and
It's a classic. Yeah.
I mean, they're like it's one mind. The whole phrasing, the whole mind. And at the time, I was fairly young in my playing. I couldn't really understand what they were doing, but it was like one person playing. So I told Gary when I met him at this camp, and he signed the copy that I didn't play afterwards because I bought a new one. He signed it. And I said, I have to tell you that just listening to it's as if it's the same person with 4 hands. One's playing vibes and the other is playing piano. It's just being on that same wavelength. It's amazing for a musician.
Right.
Amazing,
Right.
amazing. Yeah. But anyway, I wanted to say how wonderful it's been to talk with you, and I'm really happy you took the time because it's really important for people to hear what other people are doing who may not be in their own field, but the stories are the same. You do the work, you're passionate about something, people show you the way, you have good teachers, and you always show up, and you're always where you should be because that's where you want to be. And you just work for it, and this is fun, right?
No kidding. Let me tell you just real quick, Aldo, if you're wrapping up, I just want to tell you why I'm here in Australia because it's very special for me.
Please, yes.
Right before the pandemic, I was awarded a commission to write a wind ensemble marimba concerto for the Conservatorium here of Music here in Melbourne. And but because of the pandemic, it kept getting delayed because, as you know, Australia was locked down for actually more than most countries, and we just couldn't fly here, just couldn't come. So I received the award in well, I applied for it in 2019. They told me in spring of 20 I was supposed to come here in 2021, and none of that happened, of course. So now here it is, fall of 22, and we're here. So next weekend we're going to premiere my concerto for marimba, which I'm super excited about. And really, because of the pandemic, I had more time. And for those of you and yourself who compose, you know that composing is about that initial creative moment, but it's also about how to revise, how to like look at what you did and how to revise it and make it better and better. And so I've actually had more time to feel stronger about this work, and I feel like it's one of my best works. It's definitely my most involved work. So I'm so excited to play it. We do 2 concerts next weekend and a recording session. So very excited for that.
Nice. Well, I mean, I'd love to hear it in one of these days. Yes.
Well, you will sometime, I think. Okay.
Yeah. No. I look forward to it. This is exciting, exciting. But thanks again. And, as I always say, to be continued. Thanks again, Mark.